Hello, welcome to this Gespräch Atari stuff video. In this video we'll be looking at the Atari Gamestation Go from My Arcade. This portable game console was already announced by My Arcade at the Consumer Electronics Show in January 2024. However, it took until October 2025 for it to be in the hands of the users. At least for users in the US. Here in Europe the Gamestation Go wasn't available until January 2026. But enough information has been available in the meantime to create 5 tips for My Arcade Atari Gamestation Go. Due to the late release in Europe, I've only recently gotten my hands on the Gamestation Go. But in the meantime I've watched many YouTube videos and read the reviews from users overseas. I've then created some helpful tips on them, which I can now apply to my own device. Some of these tips may be already familiar to you. That is probably also the case with this first tip, but maybe there are parts there that you didn't know yet.
Tip number 1.
A feature of the Gamestation Go that My Arcade hasn't communicated, but is very valuable, is the ability to add games to the device yourself. The Gamestation Go has a micro SD card reader for this. Officially, My Arcade says this is for updating the firmware. However, this is much more convenient via Wi-Fi, and the reader is actually intended for adding games. This could be extra games for the Atari consoles that already has games built in, but also games for other retro consoles from brands like Nintendo or Sega. You probably already knew this, but the SD card is located on the top of the Gamestation Go. It accepts micro SD cards. The capacity doesn't really matter. Most retro games take up very little space compared to today's standards. I use this micro SD card for my Gamestation Go. I had it still lying around somewhere. It's only 4 GB. That may not seem like much, but it's more than enough to store your favorite games. To read this card on your PC, an adapter to a regular SD card is often included. Your PC must, of course, have an SD card reader. If your PC doesn't have one, you can also use a micro SD card reader. One end holds the SD card and the other one holds the USB port for your PC. To use the SD card in a Gamestation Go, it must be formatted as FAT32. They usually came pre-formatted in that format, but if not, you can do it yourself. You can do this by using the Disk Manager. You can access this by right-clicking the Start button and select Disk Manager. Then right-click on the removable disk and select New Simple Volume. Click Next and select the maximum number of megabytes available. You can then select the drive letter and then you get the formatting settings. Select FAT32 here. You can also give the drive a name. And the card will be formatted, which won't take long. Now we'll add the games. This is the list of all game systems supported by the Gamestation Go. The file types of each system are listed on the right. Only one file type is supported per system. The file must already have this type, renaming the extension won't work. Television uses the INT as file type, but these BIOS files must also be in that same directory. You can find them on the internet with a little bit of googling. The MAME emulator is used to play arcade games. The games for this must be in a zip file. This is the only gaming system that supports zip. On other systems the games must be unzipped. Because MAME games usually consist of multiple files, it needs to be in one zip file. And finally it supports Sega CD games. Each game must have an CUE and a bin file. And the file names of both files must be exactly the same, except for the extension of course. These BIOS files also need to be in the same directory. And the same applies here, just Google to find them. Now I don't need all those systems on my Gamestation Go. So I've made a selection of the systems I want to use. Then let's go back to the SD card. In the root of the card we've created a directory called Games. This name is mandatory, so don't choose a different name. Now all the game files can be placed in this directory, but that just makes it a bit messy. That's why I'm creating a folder for each system. I'll start with the Atari 2600. So I created these folders for all the systems I plan to use. You can choose your own name for a system. For example, I created an arcade folder for the MAME games, so it don't have to be called MAME. And here are two folders for the Atari 2600. This folder ends with pedal. Here you place your pedal games in. Because the folder ends with pedal, the Gamestation Go activates the spinner for these games. I've placed a few games in these folders to test the systems. Let's go through them briefly. First, the arcade games. These are in the zip files containing the game files. Now the 2600 games. Here I place mainly games for third-party publishers such as Activision and Amagic. I place one pedal game in here for testing. The 5200 games and the 7800 games. And I have only a few games for the links. Now let's move on to Nintendo. With a few Nintendo 64 games here. And only 2 games for the Super Nintendo. And the bin files for the Sega Genesis. Now let's see how much space all these games take up on the SD card. That's actually nothing at all. There aren't many games yet, but I think I can buy with the 4GB card for a while. Now let's eject the card by Windows first, before I actually remove the card from the PC. Then the card can go into the Gamestation Go. That's a bit tricky, especially if you're a nail biter like me. Yes, it clicked into place. The card is in, so the Gamestation Go can be turned on. When starting up, it detects that an SD card has been inserted. This allows you to choose whether you want to continue with the built-in games or go to the games on the SD card. You'll then see the list of folders I created earlier. Start with the Atari 2600. Here you have the Activision, Amagic, etc. games. Now I can finally play River Raid on the Gamestation Go. Press start, and there we go. But that's not easy with the camera in between. There, that's enough River Raid for now. And then we have 2600 pedal games here. I placed the Kaboom in there. And when I start it up, you'll see that the smart glow indicates the D-pad, but it actually activates the pedal. See? So, that works too. Then we have the Atari 5200. It has a few A52 games in it, but not all A52 games work on the Gamestation Go. I start Frogger. The game does start. But when I start it, I cannot control the frog with the D-pad. I hope they fix that. And then the Atari 7800. That one works well. The Atari Lynx games work well too. Then we go to Nintendo. I only installed 2 Super Nintendo games on it, especially so I can play this Pitfall. I think it's a pretty fun game. See, looks great. And then there are arcade games. But I dedicate a separate tip for that, because there are some things that you can configure. And then the Nintendo 64. That works well, but the quality isn't really good. The Gamestation Go is clearly underpowered for this. I'll demonstrate this with Mario Kart. You can already hear from the sound that the Gamestation Go can't keep up. You can hear it clearly now. It's playable though. Then there's the Sega Genesis. I don't have much with Sega, but it works. Anyway, this is the way you can add your own games and systems. And if you press the home button on this screen, you return to the Gamestation Go own menu. Gamestation Go has built-in Wi-Fi, allowing for easy firmware upgrades. This indicates that my arcade plans to regularly improve this device. It wasn't long after the Gamestation Go release that the first firmware upgrade arrived. This tips makes it clear that the firmware update isn't all sunshine and roses.
Tip number 2.
When the Gamestation Go was released, it was immediately put to the test in various user reviews. It also immediately became apparent that there were still a few areas that could be improved. For example, the graphics of the Vector arcade games weren't quite as they should be. Therefore, it didn't take long for my arcade to release an update to firmware 1.1. Before we can update the firmware, we first need to configure the Wi-Fi. We do this, of course, in the settings menu. Then we go to Update. There we can select a Wi-Fi network. Once we've selected the network, enter the password. I'll do this outside the camera. If we then select the return key, we'll see that Wi-Fi is enabled and connected. Now we go to Software Update. Here we see the current version. It's currently version 1.0. Then we go to Update and start the update process. After a while it discovers that an update is available. Then the download begins. Once the download is complete, the installation begins. During this process, the Gamestation Go must not be turned off. It's therefore important that you do this with a fully charged battery or connected to a power adapter. After the installation is complete, the system restarts. Once it's finished, it immediately becomes clear that the update has been installed. The menu looks much better with those gradient background. The way you scroll through the pages is also changed. Now let's go to the settings. And then to a software update. We see that now version 1.1 is installed. This version contains several improvements. One of these is that the arcade Vector games looks better. Let's go test Tempest. Look, that's a lot better than before. The colors are much brighter. But this update hasn't just brought improvements. These were the systems that were supported before the update was installed. And these are the systems that are now supported. You can see that a few systems have been dropped. Now, these were precisely the newer systems that the Gamestation Go had trouble emulating, like the Nintendo 64. But I understand that the PS1, for example, was emulated quite well by the Gamestation Go. Let's move on to the SD card. And then to the Nintendo 64. Before the update, I had Mario Kart running. But when I try that now, nothing happens. That's something you should consider before installing the update, if you like to play PS1 games on the Gamestation Go. Then you might want to wait before installing this update. In the first tip we saw that you can add your own arcade games and play them with the MAME emulator. This MAME emulator is also used to play the built-in arcade games. The Gamestation Go's menu system then ensures that the MAME emulator starts with the appropriate settings for the game. But if we start the MAME emulator ourselves for the games we added, it starts with the default settings. Fortunately, we can still change a few settings.
Tip number 3.
The biggest drawback when starting the emulator with the default settings is the controller mapping. The D-pad controls will usually work, but all the additional actions are often not accessible with the most logical buttons. But there is a way to modify the controller mapping. To configure the controller mapping for an arcade game, the game must first be started. For this I'll start Outrun. Once the game has started, we can access the settings menu by pressing the right trigger button. Then, with the D-pad, we go down to the second menu item, Input this game. We select this menu item, but not with the A button, but with the Y button. Then we enter the mapping screen. Here we can assign all the game's control functions to a button, starting with steering the car to the left or the right. These are already mapped to the left and right directions of the RetroPad 1, so we leave that as is. Then we go to Player 1 button 2. Now I don't know Outrun well enough to know what function this is, but you can find it out with the trial and error. This function is now mapped to the Y key on RetroPad 1 by default. I leave this as is. But if we go to button 1, we see that it hasn't been mapped yet. By pressing X, I now map it to the X button. So we can assign all the functions to the buttons on the controller. When you're done with that, go to the last menu option, Return to Main Menu. And you can leave this main menu by going to Return to Game. Now we have mapped the controller to the game just the way we want it. But then there's another setting that is important to configure, and that's the aspect ratio. For example, this game, Outrun, is a horizontal oriented game, and that's just also the default setting of the emulator. So for Outrun this works well and the game looks like it should. But many arcade games are vertical oriented. For example, let's start Donkey Kong. Now this is originally a vertical oriented game, but now it's displayed horizontally. The graphics has been stretched for this. If you're used to playing Donkey Kong on a console, this might not be so noticeable, but in reality the monkey isn't that wide as here. Unfortunately, we cannot change this setting directly here, but the Gamestation Go menu can. If a vertical oriented game is started via the menu sets the emulator to portrait mode. When closing the game, the mode is reset to the default setting again, but not if we don't close the game normally. We'll test this with the game Pac-Man in classic mode. We can clearly see here that the screen is in portrait mode. We leave it as is and turn off the Gamestation Go with the power button. We turn it back on again. Now the emulator is still set to portrait mode. We'll test this by restarting Donkey Kong. And indeed, Donkey Kong now starts in portrait mode. The proportions are now back to normal. The monkey isn't that wide anymore. But now all games are started in portrait mode. So if we close Donkey Kong and restart Outrun, then we see that the proportions are now wrong here. But we can fix that with the same trick. To do this, start any other game from the menu. For example, the first game, Adventure. Now the Gamestation Go is set back to landscape mode. Then we go back to Outrun. And then this game is correct again. It's a bit of hassle, but it works. The Gamestation Go is praised for its many controller inputs. It features many classic control elements, such as the spinner and the trackball, as well as modern buttons, such as the shoulder and trigger buttons. If you just bought the Gamestation Go, you want to know if all those buttons are working. But which games allows you to test all the buttons? Fortunately, there is a built-in program for that.
Tip number 4.
My arcade has a bit of a questionable reputation concerning quality. You don't want to find out that a particular button isn't working properly when it's already too late to return it. But there is a built-in program that allows you to test all the buttons. It's just a bit of tricky to access that program. To start the test program, hold down the left and right triggers and shoulder buttons while turning on the Gamestation Go. I've noted that the best way to do this is by placing the device somewhere upright. Then press the buttons with your fingers, and this leaves your thumb free to turn on the Gamestation Go. Then you have to press the 4 buttons until you hear a beep. That takes quite a while. Yes, that's it. You can now release the buttons. The program starts with some system information. Then you continue with the start button. You'll then hear an audio test and the screen turns blue. Then you press start again and the screen turns green. Then you keep pressing start until you reach the controller test screen. Meanwhile, all colors cycle through. At the end, a white screen. And then a high-pitched test tone. Quickly press start again for the next screen. You then arrive at the controller test screen. Here you see all the buttons from the Gamestation Go. For example, if you turn the spinner, you'll see it reflected on the screen. This way you can test all the buttons. I'll start with the D-pad. You see a green arrow appear for each direction. And you see a green mess of pixels emerge by moving the trackball. I'll then test all the buttons. Like the settings and credit buttons. Select and start. And every time you press a button, the text on the button turns green. This way I test all the buttons, including the numeric keypad. This way you can test all the numeric keys. Because I don't think there isn't a single program that uses all the numeric keys. But this way you can test all of them. I think I've tested most of them now. Oh yeah, the shoulder and trigger buttons. Now I think I've got them all. But I still see one white button. Which one is that? Oh yes, this the home button, of course. Yes, now I've got them all. That is also indicated by the text key pass. So this is how you can test all the buttons. You can exit this program by turning the Gamestation Go off and on. And then we're back at the home screen. Gamestation Go comes with 200 built-in games. And we can add more games via the SD card. It's only a shame that we cannot access the setting menus of the emulators. Yeah, and we really like to see support for even more gaming systems. Personally, I found it a real shame there is no emulator for Atari 8-bit home computer games. If only we could add more emulator cores ourselves. But all of this is possible by installing customer firmware.
Tip number 5.
The Gamestation Go is essentially the portable version of the Gamestation Pro. which was released by my arcade a few years ago. It was inevitable that at some point people will start experimenting with the system. A group managed to create custom firmware for the Gamestation Pro, allowing users to add more systems and access to the emulator settings menus. It is of course just a matter of time before it was also started for the Gamestation Go. This is the My Arcade Gamestation Pro. It was released by My Arcade 2 years ago. Like the Gamestation Go, the console has 200 built-in games, most of which for Atari systems. The difference is that you connect this unit to your television or monitor and it has 2 wireless external controllers. But with the Gamestation Pro, just like with the Gamestation Go, you can also add your games yourself. It looks quite similar. But with the custom firmware, the added games can also be started via the menu. And that looks much better. But with the custom firmware, more systems can also be added. This makes it possible to play Atari 8-bit home computer games. This doesn't mean that all those things will also be possible with custom firmware for the Gamestation Go. But almost immediately after the Gamestation Go became available, a post was started on Atari Age forum to investigate whether custom firmware could also be created on this system. It was already quite soon possible to create a system dump. This also allowed them to see which files are being used. From this they could also determine which emulators are being used. It's interesting to read all those steps. Like here, how to download the image of the Gamestation Go. It's done by connecting the Gamestation Go to a PC via the USB cable. By then turning on the Gamestation Go while holding down the volume down button, the console starts in flash mode. The image can then be downloaded to the PC using the ArchiDev tool. And we're familiar with this program, because that was previously also used to update the firmware of the Atari 2600 Plus. If we Google this, we found a website where the tool can be downloaded. Let's try if I can get the PC to recognize the Gamestation Go. So I downloaded the tool, unshipped it and started it. I then connected the Gamestation Go to the PC via USB. It's still off, so the tool indicates no devices found. Now I'm turning it on. But first let's check which side of the volume button is the down one. Okay, the left one of course. Then I press that and turn on the Gamestation Go. Hey, now I hear a beep. And the tool now indicates found one loader device. So the Gamestation Go is found by the tool. Now we should be able to download the firmware to the PC. But I don't want to go any further than that at this point. They are still researching all the steps that are needed. Ultimately, there should be a very simple installation method that almost everyone can perform. But they haven't gotten that far yet at the moment this video is recorded. But also a lot has already been accomplished. For example, they managed to run Atari 8-bit home computer games on the Gamestation Go. And how about this? Doom on the Gamestation Go. This is the PC version of Doom. And it looks like it runs pretty smoothly. But it will take a while before that's available to everyone. But I do recommend keep following this thread on Atari Age. I'll put a link to it in the description below this video. And that was my last tip for the Gamestation Go. I hope you found some useful information in there. I'm personally curious about the development of the custom firmware for the Gamestation Go. When it's developed enough that it's reasonably easy to install, I definitely do that. Of course, I report it on a video. But this video has come to an end. A good time to click on that like button. And also on subscribe, so you won't miss anything anymore about Atari. Thanks for watching and see you at the next Atari Stuff video. Bye!